Welcome back to another episode of Be Our Guest here on Musical Theater Radio. I am your host, as always, Jean-Paul Yovanov. Today we are speaking with a woman who can do it all. She's a Broadway actor, composer, lyricist, book writer, educator, and probably a few secret talents that people might not know about. Maybe we can pry those out of her at some point. It gives me great pleasure to welcome to the show, Sheilah Rae. Sheilah, how you doing?
Hi, Jean-Paul. So happy to be here. Thank you for inviting
Wonderful. So I always like to get to know the people that I'm talking with and introduce them to the listening audience. So I always ask for a 30-second bio. So who is Sheilah in 30 seconds?
Oh my goodness, that's a tough one.
Yeah.
I'm a mother and a grandmother first and foremost, I guess. That's my biggest bio. Then after that, I'm a composer, a lyricist, and a book writer, and I'm former Broadway actress, singer, dancer, was in many, many Broadway shows. And so that's kind of who I am.
Perfect.
30 seconds or less.
Well, we'll get to know a little bit more about you in a little bit. So I want to take it back first, though. Were you always into musical theater growing up, or was that something you discovered a little bit later in life?
I was always in the musical theater. I started performing as a kid in Chicago, which is where I grew up. And I think I made my debut at 10 in a Chicago Park District production of Babes in Toyland. And I was a little toe dancing doll. And at the very end of the production, all the cast came out and the little toe dancing doll came out and we got to sing Hail to Toyland. And I was belting it out. And the conductor said to me, Sheilah, that's great that you can sing so well, but you need to blend in with everybody. And that's when my mother discovered that I could really belt it out. So yeah, I guess I've been in musical theater all my life. I've made some detours along the way. I worked in the jingle business for a number of years. I had my own production company doing music for advertising, and now that's something that my daughter does in California. She's a composer out there. Although she's got 3 kids herself, so she's kind of tied up with the pandemic at the moment, homeschooling, but she's a wonderful composer, and she grew up under my Steinway, so what can I tell you? That's a sort of genetic predisposition.
Did you always then, you knew at that moment you wanted to be a performer of some kind, or was there
I knew
sometimes
I
a
wanted
mental
to be a
detour?
performer. You know, I knew I wanted to be a performer, and my mother tells me that, you know, she knew at a very early age that I was musical and that I was going to end up being a performer because she said I would sing myself to sleep as a little girl. You know, that I was always singing some kind of new song that I had heard on the radio, or that, and my parents were, you know, they were wonderfully supportive. I came from a fairly musical family. My father's oldest sister was a concert pianist, and she actually ended up teaching piano at UCLA, but she toured the world with Rosa Ruiz as her accompanist when she was young, and then she made her debut with the Chicago Symphony at 16. So she was, you know, quite an amazing musician. And my grandfather was a cantor. So there was always singing and music in the home.
So it was
my
genetic.
father's home. And then my mother, on my mother's side, her father passed away early, but he was a violinist. And then my grandmother remarried, and she married another violinist. So my mother always had that music growing up too.
So yeah, it was genetic. You couldn't get away from this.
It is, yeah, it is, without question.
So how did you get from Chicago, where you were born, grew up, to New York, to Broadway?
Well, like I said, I was lucky that my parents really believed in great training. And so I had wonderful teachers. I had a wonderful ballet teacher, Edna McCrae, who was actually quite well known and famous in Chicago. I had wonderful musical training on the piano as well as singing. I studied with Esther LaBerge Gans, who was Rudolph Gans's wife, and Rudolph Gans, you may remember, was the conductor of the Chicago Symphony. So that by the time I was ready to go to college, it was pretty clear that I was going to be a music major of some kind. And I also had the opportunity to study in Europe. I went to the Royal Academy of Music and the Guildhall School of Music and Drama for my junior year abroad. So I had great training, really great training. Plus the fact that when, because I started as a performer as a young kid, I knew a lot of people. By the time I was in college even, or graduating high school, I'd been working and doing this little project or that little project as a dancer primarily. But my first professional job on an equity card was in 1963 at Chicago's Tent House. We did, let's see, we did Flower Drum Song, Oklahoma, and High Button Shoes. And the Oklahoma production was directed by Gordon Davidson. It was his first musical ever that he directed. And then he went on to, of course, be Gordon Davidson of the Amundsen, and somebody that we all revere as a director. Now retired, of course, but just so brilliant. And I can remember Alan Case, who was the star of that production, playing Curly. Then, of course, Alan went on to star as in Hallelujah Baby on Broadway. But Alan said to me, "You listen to this director. He's very, very smart. And anything that you can learn here, you must absorb." And he was so right. You know, he was just so right. So that's, you know, kind of how I got into being an equity performer. So that every summer I went off and did some kind of summer stock someplace. So by the time I was ready to move to New York, after I graduated college, I'd worked a lot. I knew a lot of people. And I was very lucky when I got to New York. I got cast right away in a review at the King Cole Room of the St. Regis Hotel, which at that time was a beautiful little cabaret space. And they were doing musical hits of Broadway reviews there. And Shirley Rich saw me in that review. And she said, "Gee, I'd like you to come in and read for me for cabaret." And she said, "Well, I came in and read, and I was so excited, you know, cabaret, oh my God, oh my God. And she said, "Well, you're not really Sally Bowles, you're much too sweet, but I can put you in Fiddler like next week." And it turned out that the dance captain of Fiddler was somebody that I'd worked with at Tent House in 1963. Wow. So I knew him. So that's how I got the job. What can I tell you?
So your first
1967. So that was my first Broadway show.
Wow, Fiddler.
And that was the original Broadway company, replacing in the original Broadway company.
Wow, that's a good way to start. Your first Broadway. Fiddler's not a bad place.
It's a very good way to start. And wonderful, you know, wonderful people in that company. Maria Karnilova was still playing. Oh my God. The mother, and she was fantastic, and there was so much to learn by just watching her. I was understudying Tanya Everett, who Jerry Robbins loved. In fact, he loved both Everett kids, Tanya and Timmy. And so, you know, there was lessons to be learned there.
Wow. So after you finished Fiddler, because what happened next? You finished your
I went from Fiddler to doing another review in Detroit, and that review actually was another kind of hits of Broadway review. And from there I went directly into a company that was being formed like a repertory company at Goodspeed. This was before Michael Price was at Goodspeed. In fact, I think Michael came that summer, late in the summer, to work the box office.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he was coming from Chicago too, you know, and his aunt, who knew my mother in Chicago, they were trying to make a thing, but, you know, it wasn't going to work. Anyway, I was working at Goodspeed in a company called National Lyric Arts Foundation. And this company was formed by Al Selden and Hal James, who were the original producers of Man of La Mancha, which is where it had originated at Goodspeed. And so they formed this company, and Alfred Drake and Howard Da Silva were the two major directors and organizers of this company. So, I mean, Howard Da Silva, do I need to say more? I mean, he was just so fantastic.
Yeah.
And Alfred was Alfred, and he was just brilliant. And we did 3 musicals that summer. We did a new musical called After You, Mr. Hyde, which was about Jekyll and Hyde, and Alfred played that role. And Nancy Dussault was in that company, Christopher Hewitt. Grover Dale was a choreographer that summer. So then the next project was a version of Allegro that they thought they were going to take to Broadway that John Fernley helped produce. And John was one of Richard Rodgers' best friends and producers. And so he was involved with that. And it was a terrific production. It didn't move, which was really a shame. And then the third show was a brand new musical that Tom Shepard, who of course produces all the Broadway cast albums, did the music for, with a guy named Charlie Burr, who was an executive at Columbia Records. And Charlie and Tom had written this charming review-styled piece, the title of which changed a million different times, but nothing ever happened with that either. But there were absolutely wonderful people in that company. So it was another chance to just observe and learn.
It makes me sad sometimes that all the, like you just named a couple of musicals that were new and didn't go anywhere, that just got lost in time, right? They, for whatever reason, just timing or
exactly. Well, we all know, the story of many of these kinds of musicals, but I was down in Bristol Riverside Theater, which is a beautiful, I don't know if you know that theater at all. It's just outside of Philadelphia. It's about a 500 seat equity house.
Okay.
And they do new work from time to time. And they were doing a production of my musical, which was then called I Married Wyatt Earp. We've changed the title now to The Belle of Tombstone. And this guy comes up to me afterwards, and it's Norman Sachs, who wrote the music for After You, Mr. Hyde. I hadn't seen him since 1967. And here we are in 2005 doing this production. And it was marvelous to see him. And, I often wondered what happened to him, but he stayed in the business. He worked as a composer, doing a lot of film scoring and other projects like that. Terrific guy, terrific talent.
And it's a great thing that everyone has talent.
And that show starred Alfred Drake. So
exactly. That is one of my things that I love, is discovering these new musicals that no one knows and unfortunately are lost in time. And I wish there were some kind of cast recordings of or creations of these shows. Like someone comes back, finds the work and puts it on. But I bet it'd be so hard to find the score and the lead sheets and any of that stuff, because it's probably all lost now.
Well, it depends. It depends on how careful the composer was and how careful his estate was in managing the music after they're gone. But I work with a company in New York. I helped co-found it with Joe Barros, called New York Theater Barn. And our whole mission is to present new work. That's what we're all about. Joe has a keen eye for this stuff. I met him at the Hart School, which is when he was a student. And they were doing a production of I Married Wyatt Earp at the Hart School, now called the Belle of Tombstone. And Joe came up to me and said, I love this musical. I'm going to produce it on Broadway someday. And I thought to myself, yeah, sure, honey. I bet you are. And God bless him. He has been so true to his word. He's been such a champion of this piece. And the dean at the Hart School also loves this piece. He directed the first version of it. And we did a version of it last year, again, at the Hart School.
Wow.
So I've had 2 wonderful workshops of it there and some beautiful productions of it, including one that Joe choreographed and helped produce off Broadway at 59 East 59, which is a beautiful complex of theaters. So the show's, he did it. He did what he said he was going to try to do. We haven't gotten to Broadway yet, but we're trying. We're really trying.
That's fantastic. So let's actually shift a little bit, go from your acting career to the writing of shows. Was that something that you, again, discovered a little bit later, or have you been always writing stuff and writing songs?
I'd always been a songwriter.
Okay.
And when I was even performing on Broadway and working Broadway shows, I was writing songs. I was a pop songwriter because I was also kind of, moonlighting, doing cabaret and doing girl singer with charts up in the Catskills. You go with your book of all this music and you turn up and you sing your songs. And so it became increasingly difficult when my kids were like 3 and 5 to feed them at 5:30, make sure the babysitter was in place, then run to a production of something I was in. At that time, I was doing the 10th anniversary revival of Company that Playwrights Horizons produced. And I thought to myself, I'm really a songwriter and I'm good at this. I should be doing this more. And that's when I actually made the segue into doing more jingles. And then I met a woman through advertising named Lois Wyse, who was the woman who created the slogan with a name like Smucker's, "It's Gotta Be Good." I mean, Lois was just incredible. And she was married to Lee Goober, Goober, Ford and Gross, that was the big summer stock touring. And he had a beautiful theater out on Long Island in Westbury. And Lois and I became friends. And she had just written a book called Funny You Don't Look Like a Grandmother. And she said to me, I think it could make a musical. I'm not sure. And I read the book and I called her like 4 hours later and said, "Lois, I love this book. It's definitely could be a musical." And Freddie Gershon, who is her cousin, fixed us up with Bob Waldman, who had written many musicals, including what's Bob's most famous musical? Robber Bridegroom.
Okay.
And Bob is just a terrific composer. So Bob and I got together and we wrote Funny You Don't Look Like a Grandmother. And Lois was kind of like the supervising everything. She has co-book and co-lyric credit with me because all of the ideas for everything came from Lois. I mean, she's just an idea person. Her ideas pour out of her.
Yeah.
She's just, and she was amazing. And so that was the first musical that I wrote, and that was 1993. And I never dreamed that I'd be back in the theater. I always thought I'd kind of stay in the pop world. And, Barry Manilow is my oldest best friend, and he was in the pop world. And, so I just thought that's where I'd kind of land. But I was back where I belonged, obviously. And it's been a great joy. And I've had an interesting writing career, that's for sure.
Did you find what was the difficulties or simplicities of writing for the musical stage rather than a jingle? Did you find that it's pretty much the same, writing's writing, or did you find that it was a little bit more difficult or different?
Well, writing's writing, but in 30 seconds, you have to tell a story and do it fast. And in 2 hours and change, you get a chance to tell your same story, but expand it a little bit. And I felt that writing for the theater, which was something that was so generic, is so part of me because I'd been in so many shows. I knew how to do this, and writing jingles, you're always at the beck and call of a client who's telling you exactly what they want and how they want it. And also in those years, I was a woman in the jingle business, and there were no women in the jingle business. So it was difficult. I mean, my partner, who was also a woman, we would pitch these ideas and they'd say, well, you can't write for Ford trucks. You're women, and which was ridiculous, but that's the thinking.
Mm-hmm.
So, we'd get, feminine hygiene products and perfumes and things that were soft that they thought we could write. And at a certain point you say, how many perfumes do you want to write? Do you want to keep doing this? Do you want to struggle, push up against these guys who are winning all the big jobs? And so I was happy to be writing for the theater because I really knew that world. Yeah, and I certainly knew all the people.
that does not hurt, knowing everybody in the industry already. Yeah, that whole thing about you only writing for the softer stuff, that is such a weird mentality when you actually think about it, right? Like you're saying Rodgers and Hammerstein couldn't write for soft and women stuff, or Mary Rodgers couldn't write for just, I don't know why I'm sticking with Rodgers.
Well,
but
I'll tell you an interesting story. I was president of the League of Professional Theater Women from 2000 to 2003. And we had quite an illustrious, and still do have, wonderful membership. And Dale Orlander Smith, who you may know is a brilliant Black playwright, had written a play that was being produced at the Wilma Theater in Philadelphia and directed by Blanca Ziska brilliantly, about an Irish family. And Variety came out with a review and said, well, what does Dale Orlander Smith know about an Irish family? She shouldn't be writing this. And she flipped out and she asked me, as president of the league, would you please write a letter on my behalf to Variety saying, writers are writers, and we know what we know, and we research what we don't know. Give me a break here. And so, and we're now kind of caught in that to a degree. Because with all the BIPOC writers who have not, persons of color who have not had an opportunity on Broadway the way they should have, and the transition that Broadway and off-Broadway, or theater in general, is going to go through to produce works of all kinds of writers, we're going to be looking at who's writing what, and what their real statement is, what their heart is. I also sit on the board of something called the Brett Adams and Paul Reich Foundation. Brett Adams, I don't know if you knew him or knew of him, but he was a theatrical agent for years and years, and he was my agent. He was just a brilliant man, a wonderful guy. And when he passed away, he and his partner Paul Reich left about $4 million in escrow for gifts to writers, playwrights, composers, lyricists. So we give out 3 awards annually, although this year we gave out 9 because it was a pandemic. And last year we actually, with the Venturous Theater Fund and New Dramatists, combined our forces and gave out about 150 awards to writers in need. But because it was just, it was a terrible time, and we had the money and we needed to do that to help these writers. It was just an incredible time. But the foundation also this year, in looking at the writers that we gave awards to, we were very careful to honor the work of many writers of a variety of different backgrounds and color, because it's important to do that. And these writers need to know they're valued. So that's the Paul Reich Foundation, Brett Adams Foundation. Anyway, I'm very proud of that work, because it's, we have an incredible advisory board that helps determine who gets these awards. Everyone from Andre Bishop to Emily Morse new dramatists, and it's just, you know, Elizabeth Williams, commercial producer, wonderful people who are helping pick this material.
So you've had your first show, the Grim. And so tell us now a little bit more about the Belle of Tombstone, because you actually contacted me, I don't know, a couple months ago about it, and you sent me an email about it, and then I don't know what happened. We just didn't connect again, and then we reconnected at NAMT.
Yes, so right.
Or
maybe Joe did. I don't know. But
oh.
the Belle of Tombstone, the composer is Michele Brourman, and my co-book writer is Thomas Edward West, who's also a wonderful playwright. And I met Michele. I got fixed up with her on a blind writing date by Michael Kirker, the angel of ASCAP, who is the guardian angel of all musical theater writers.
Yeah.
And Michael said to me, "You need to meet Michele. She's the perfect writer for this." And I remember him, we were still working with cassettes then. He handed me a cassette of her music.
Yeah.
And I put it in the car, and I'm driving home from the city, and I had to pull over, and I burst out crying because the music was so exactly what I had in my mind of what the music could be like for the Belle of Tombstone. It was just, anyway, Michele and I have been on a journey with this thing, that's for sure. And we're hoping to do a concert version of it now in Arizona, under the stars, next season with the Arizona rep. And Joe will fly out and direct it, Joe Barros.
Wow. So what is the plot of
well, it's based on a story that I had uncovered in a book called Pioneer Jews, about a woman named Josephine Sarah Marcus. And the chapter, there was a picture of her in this chapter called Humdingers. And, you know, there's all these actresses and different people in it. And then there's this picture of Josephine Sarah Marcus, and she's kind of naked from the waist up with this very see-through shawl kind of covering her strategically. It's a racy picture even for now, much less 1879 when it was supposedly taken. There's questions, is it her? Isn't it her? Did she really take that picture? I don't know. But she was a very aristocratic girl, Jewish girl from San Francisco who ran away from home and joined a traveling stagecoach version of HMS Pinafore, which was touring all over the West. There were lots of Pinafore companies out there. And right, exactly. And she met in Tombstone, Wyatt Earp, met and fell in love with Wyatt Earp, and was his common law wife for 45 years. And I thought, oh my God, if that's not the stuff of musicals, what is? You know, you have this Jewish girl and she's like singing and dancing with a troupe, and she runs away from home, and her parents are really wealthy. But, you know, anyway, she and Wyatt are married in a Jewish portion of a cemetery in Colma, California.
Oh, wow.
And she was his common law wife for 45 years. There's no indication that they were actually ever married, although she says that they got married on Lucky Baldwin's yacht, which he was, you know, big, famous San Francisco entrepreneur, and was friendly with them. And they traveled all over the West, wherever the gold rush was, or he could, you know, Wyatt, he was into race horses, and then he was an umpire for fisticuffs, for boxing matches, and anyway, they'd go wherever. They were adventurers.
Wow, that's like.
So that's the story. That's, you know, that's basically the story. And actually, our story is about the women. It's because these women were so challenged in those times, and there were 5 Earp brothers, although in our it's too many, you know, Earp wives to follow. So there's 3 Earp wives, which is plenty. And, you know, they combat, they come up against Josie, who's come in and sort of disrupted this happy family life that they're trying to create for themselves in Tombstone. And she, because Wyatt came to Tombstone with another woman. And she was a drug addict, and you know, the show deals with, if it's there and it was out there then, this show deals with it.
So when did you write this show? How long?
Well, we began writing it in about 95, I want to say.
Okay.
But our first like readings and so forth, we were developing with a director who unfortunately passed away. And then we put it to bed for a long time because we didn't know really what we wanted to do with it.
Yep.
And so it took a while. You know, these things take a long time to get right.
Yeah.
And the production at 5090s 59th was in 2011. And we're still working on it. I mean, you know, we think we got it right because this last production up at the Hart School a year ago was so beautiful. Ralph Perkins, who's a director and a choreographer and on the faculty there, did such a great job with it, really great job with it. And we looked at it and said, you know, let's close the piano lid now. We're done. I think we're done with this. And so now we're just trying to look for licensing and, you know, hoping that this Arizona rep presentation will get licensors interested in it. And we'll get the orchestrations all updated and ready to go. And yeah, because Bruce Coughlin, who was a Tony Award winner, I'm sure you've heard of Bruce, he did the orchestrations for the show.
Yeah. It's funny. We're one of the few industries where it takes 20 years to get something.
Exactly.
Idea.
20 years. I know. I know.
It's crazy, but we keep doing it.
People don't even realize what they went through with West Side Story, and that was 10 years, but it was actually even longer than 10 years because they had the ideas, and then they, you know, changed it, and they didn't know what they wanted to do. So,
either we're really resilient or really crazy. I'm not sure, but a little bit of both. Yes.
Both.
So what have you been doing with yourself since the pandemic happened? Have you been, what have you been working on?
Been working on a couple of things. The first thing that happened during the pandemic was that I wrote a song with Deborah Barsha, who's really kind of my new most frequent collaborator. Deborah wrote Radiant Baby. I don't know if you know who she is. But she's also a very good book writer. So we write book, lyric, and musics together. Mm-hmm. And we wrote a song for the election because it was very important to get women out to vote in this election. It was key to getting Trump out. And so we wrote this song called Turn It All Around, and it had about 16,000 views on YouTube. We did a video. Her sister has a wonderful production company out of Boston, and she did the video. It was an interesting journey because we had to research all the footage that we used. And you can still see, we've kept the song up on YouTube because it's really, even now, the issues that the song deals with are important issues. So we wrote that. Then we wrote a short musical for the National Alliance of Musical Theater. They had a contest, a 15-minute musical contest. And while the show didn't win the contest, I showed it to a commercial producer that I'm friendly with. And she said, I love this musical. I love these characters. I think this should be a television series, and I'm going to run with it, and I'm going to get it to be a series. So we've been kind of trying to figure out how to take these characters now and redo this so that it can be kind of like a musical series for TV.
Wow.
And I'm really excited about it because the characters are great. They're funny, and it's about a girl singer who's in this wedding band, and all the characters in the wedding band who are hilarious, plus her own family, which is hilarious. So it promises a good laugh if we can move it forward.
Wow, congratulations on all that stuff.
Thanks. I mean, just having someone interested is always, because it's tough.
Yeah.
Everybody interested in anything. Everybody wants to say no.
Yep. And like we mentioned earlier, it's just finding that right moment, or just, stumbling onto that right person who happens to see it. It's just,
Exactly.
you know,
Yeah.
you can have all the skill in the world, but
Yeah.
that
Deborah and
tiny
I've
bit
been,
of luck.
we have two one-act musicals that we wrote that were commissioned by the Edna Ferber estate. The woman who runs that estate, Julie Gilbert, is Edna Ferber's grandniece, and she is a longtime friend of mine.
Mm.
And she had been asking me for years, what do you think of this novel? What do you think of that novel of Edna Ferber's? I mean, she came to me with Giant years ago. I didn't know what to do with it. There were so many stories going on. But we wrote these two one-act musicals, Deborah Barsha and I, and we're really, really happy with them. So we're looking, and they make an evening now. We have the two one acts that are each about 45 minutes. And so we're looking for a theater that is going to mount them. We were going to do them with New York Theater Barn as a fundraiser, and then the pandemic hit. And so Theater Barn did do a presentation, which you can see online, with an interview with Julie and then some songs from both musicals, and Barsha and I are talking about the show. It's a very nice selling point for the show, but I'm hoping that we'll find a theater interested in doing these Ferbers, because I think they're important, and they deal with a lot of immigration issues and issues that Ferber was writing about in the 20s and early 30s that are still with us today. Nothing's changed.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So during the pandemic, did you have to learn any new skills that you didn't think you would have to learn? Because as you know, we all had to go online, and we started recording things and doing video and things like that. Is there any skills that you discovered that you had to figure out?
Well, I had to try to kind of figure out GarageBand. I had to try to figure out how to record things at home. And I had to try to even figure out Zoom and StreamYard. I'm no spring chicken here. I've been around a long time. But
Look,
adapting in technology is not one of my strengths. So
I don't think that's an age thing. I think that's because I have problems sometimes with stuff. So everybody, I think, has problems with that type of thing. But
I know.
it's crazy.
So yeah, I mean, of course, we all had to adapt
Yeah.
immediately to what, and I'm proudest, I think, of what New York Theater Barn has been able to achieve through this pandemic. I mean, Joe has really put virtual presentations on the map for musical theater writers, and we're very proud of what he and Jen Sandler, our young associate artistic director, have been able to achieve with these presentations. And these writers are so grateful because they have a format to present their work. So, so yeah, we made that shift too.
Oh, my brain's already fallen asleep. I had a question. I had a question in my head, and then it went completely gone. Oh yes, now I remember. There's a light at the end of the tunnel for theater. How do you see, personally, how do you see things playing out? Do you think people will come back, in your opinion, or do you think it's going to take time, or it's going to be?
I think it's going to take time. I do. I think people are going to be initially afraid. I think the diehard theater goers in Manhattan will be there, but I don't know how quickly the bridge and tunnel or the tourists will be willing to come in just to go to the theater. We'll have to see. I heard an interesting interview with Michael Riedel about 2 weeks ago, where he was talking about the comeback of theater and what everybody is hoping and thinking, and he said some very interesting things. He said he thought that the price of tickets would probably have to drop because people are just not going to spend that kind of money, and that the $500 Hamilton ticket may go by the wayside now. Um,
Yeah.
Nobody knows.
Yeah.
Nobody knows.
This
I
is
mean,
unprecedented.
things are, you know, it's an unprecedented time, and nobody knows what's going to happen when theaters reopen.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
I guess, but
You know, it's a
yeah.
big question.
Yeah. Theater will survive. It survived through time, and everything else has happened. It's
Of
just,
course,
we just don't know.
and people want stories, and they want to see themselves in these stories. And Michael Reel was doing an interview with Jerry Zaks, and Jerry said, you know, he's doing Mrs. Doubtfire, and he's banking on the fact that people are going to want to laugh.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we've come through a horrible time.
Yep.
And he's hoping that people are going to want to laugh. That's what I'm hoping with the Edna Ferbers, that people are going to want to laugh.
Yeah. And there's going to be a baby boom of work too, because what else have we had to do? Everything shut down. You might as well write. And I've talked to so many people who hunkered down and just worked and worked and worked. So over these next few years, it's going to be exciting how much new work is going to come forward in the next 5 years.
It's going to be very exciting, but even, you know, as I watch wonderful show after show every other week being presented on New York Theater Barn, I'm thinking to myself, who's going to produce all of these musicals?
I know.
Where are they going to go? And all of them have wonderful ideas and beautiful songs. And, you know, these writers are so talented. Oh my God. And yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see where all this new work lands.
Well, how many theaters are there in the world? You know, let's just spread all these new musicals out amongst them and, you know, get them playing somewhere. So.
Exactly. And there are adventurous directors who are willing to take a stab at new work and to present it. I've just recently become aware of a theater in Arkansas that's actually well funded by Walmart money. And this theater is one of the few theaters that's had the opportunity to expand its staff.
Oh, wow.
And is really committed to a new work series. And it's in Arkansas, you know, so just never know.
If only every theater company just took one slot of their season and said, we're going to put on something new, just to see what happens, just to expose people. And I wish that happened more. But
I think that it will, actually, because I think that people are going to be hungry for new ideas, and yes, I definitely think it will. And I also really believe that virtual theater is also going to stay with us for a while, that people have discovered a way of seeing things online or on their computer or on their television, if they're that savvy to hook it all up that way. and it's exciting. I mean, I've seen some virtual presentations that I thought were brilliant. This new film version of The Last 5 Years is just fantastic. So
we've got an exciting, scary future ahead of us.
We definitely do.
Sheilah, thank you so much for coming on and talking to us and introducing, you know, the shows and learning more about you and all that. Thank you so much, and congratulations on all your work.
Thank you so much, and thank you for inviting me.
Oh, no
I really
problem.
feel very honored.
Well,
You know, I'm just a writer. Who do I meet? I sit at home and, you know, type away. Or bang on my piano, driving everyone crazy in my household.
But before we go, I always ask 3 questions of my guests because I want to get to know you guys a little bit more.
Okay.
There's no right or wrong answers to these questions, except for one. There might be no answer. So we'll see how you answer. All right. So question number 1. What creator or team within musical theater has had a great influence on you? No, this could be a composer, lyricist, director, producer, stage manager. Could be somebody famous or not famous, like a teacher you had. Is there anybody in the musical theater world that's had an influence on you?
Oh my gosh. You know, when you're around as long as I have, you have so many influencers. That's a tough question.
I know, just all the names you mentioned already.
You know, early on, I had a wonderful teacher in England, an acting teacher. And his name was Stanley Hildebrand. He was on faculty at the Guildhall. And he, more than any teacher that I had, instilled in me the importance of truth, of honesty in what you present.
Mm-hmm.
And he really, as a young actress, you know, I was kind of a musical theater, and, you know, there was a lot of gloss in what I was doing. And he really got me to hone in and be honest as an actor. And that is what I was able to carry over into my writing, or I hope I've been able to carry over into my writing.
Nice.
Honesty and truth.
I love when my guests mention someone like that, the unsung heroes, right? Some people, you know, say Sondheim or you know, Hammerstein or you know, Hal Prince, but it's everybody knows about them, but it's these unsung people that will fade into time, but have had such an influence on so many people.
Impression on me, you know, I was so young and really didn't, you know, even though I had been working for a long time, by the time I met him, I was maybe 20, 21, because it was my junior year in college, but I still didn't understand what that really meant.
Yeah.
And he's the one who taught me what that really meant.
Correct answer. That's the right answer. 1 point for you for the questions. Awesome. Question number 2. What is your favorite jingle of all time? That, not that you necessarily wrote, but as a jingle writer, what one did you go, oh, I wish I'd come up with that?
Oh my God. Well, we would have great harmony singing in car trips, singing the Chock full of nuts song, which is a terrible jingle, but my family used to just love to howl that at the top of their lungs and sing it in the car when we were driving someplace. Chock full of nuts is that heavenly coffee, and oh my God. So yeah, there you are. A terrible jingle, but you know,
but it worked. You're still singing it. You did not forget it. Oh man. I kind of, on a side note, I kind of wish, and this would be terrible, but a whole musical just with jingle length songs. If you could write that, the cast recording would be like 96 songs because they're all 30 seconds. But.
Well, it's interesting. Well, you know, when you write a 1-act musical or even a short musical, I mean, they are only 1 minute, maybe max, some of these songs. Well, Deborah and I call them songlets. Not full songs, they're like mini songs.
Yeah.
So, yeah, a lot of songlets.
Another correct answer. Can't go wrong with that one. And question number 3, the one that's going to tell the audience most about you. Food in the theater or cell phones in the theater? Which is worse?
Oh my God. That's, I mean, they're both really bad. I think cell phones are worse though, quite frankly. I mean, if we can get people to turn off their cell phones, that will be so wonderful. Although a lot of people now are using their cell phones like hearing aids. So their cell phones stay on. And that's where the problems, it's not like they're getting calls or they want to get calls.
Yeah.
It's just that their phones ring because their phones are on, because they're using their phones like hearing aids. Yeah. And they're not using the hearing system that comes from the theater. So that's a problem. And then of course the crinkly paper, that's another problem. But that's, food in the theater, I don't think is as big a problem as the cell phone issue, quite frankly.
When you said both, that was the correct answer. Both are awful.
Both are awful. Although somehow they manage food in the theater in England.
Do they? Oh.
Yeah, they do. You can at intermission buy ice cream and candies and keep it in the theater. And
I don't know. My biggest problem with food in the theater is after, when people just leave their garbage on the floor.
Oh, well.
Drives me insane.
It drives me insane in a movie theater when people.
Yes, exactly.
And the popcorn's all over the place. What's the matter with these people?
I know. I don't understand people. 3 correct answers, Sheilah. Congratulations. I have no prizes, but you did great. So, again, thank you so much for coming on. Congratulations on all the shows. When the Belle of Tombstone hits Arizona, let me know. I'll promote the heck out of it.
Oh,
And
thank you. All right, I definitely will. I definitely will.
that is awesome.
Good job.
All
I
right. We
appreciate it.
were
Great
speaking with
fun.
thank you. We've been speaking with Sheilah Rae today here on Be Our Guest on Musical Theater Radio. Tune in next week as we'll speak with another guest or guest about their life, love, and passion that is musical theater. I am your host, as always, Jean-Paul Jovanov, and I'll see you when I see you.